You'll have to excuse me. I see Cassidy.
Yep.
What's your first name? Thanks for doing this, man. I'm really excited. We've had some great interviews. Yeah.
This has been an interesting kind of lead up to this little soiree.
Okay. No, it's been cool, man. It's been awesome to hear you guys and hear our guys remember and the thoughts back and forth. Just talking about it.
I tell you what it's done is it's made me go back and spend quite a bit more time on YouTube in the last couple of weeks.
Right.
You know, looking for not so much just, watching the shows, but trying to find little snippets of, our line, your line, Devils, etc., warming up, running through stuff in a parking lot, that kind of thing, where you really get to hear what the hell they were playing.
Yeah, exactly. Crazy. Yeah. It's and that's the thing that I like is, you hear the full shows and all that stuff, but it's the parking lot stuff and those little intricacies that were different. You had Hannum, who was doing something incredible and groundbreaking, and then you had Ralph, who was a little established in his thing, and then you had Float and Blue Devils,
just playing that shit. Go back to the picture. You look a lot better without that grizzly beard.
Yeah.
And there's our fearless leader.
Oh boy, no.
Mr. Michael Jones.
Jordan Hockey.
Hey, how's it going?
What's happening?
Wow.
Look at him. He's so fucking chiseled. God damn. Am I the only one that's eaten in the last 32 years? Jesus.
And that's Scott, James.
Okay, in a nutshell,
Scott. That is
all right.
Scott Cassidy. Yes,
it's a super honor to get together with this legendary group. I really appreciate it. And it's just a fun thing that we're interviewing cats who shared a special night together and just get their thoughts. How did you get involved in drum corps and how did you get to the cadets?
So I was with Bando, is that what we called them back in the day, Jones? Snares and a quad that went up and joined Garfield, and that was really the first time I had ever even heard of DCI. I would have been a freshman in high school at that point in time, and then went and saw the '84 show. That was, in my opinion, that's the best show that there's ever been. From that point on, I was like, okay, I want to give that shit a go. And then they came home from '84's tour and started, there was obviously some good, but boy, bus issues, no food, no water. I was like, do I really want to do this? Went up in '85, tried out for bass, and was there for 6 more years.
Wow. Well, I'm going to agree with you. '84 is the best show of all time. '84 Cadets. I agree. Yeah, that's an amazing show. Something that just struck me is back when I marched, maybe it's a West Coast thing, but the idea of a sophomore in high school marching in a top 12, much less championship corps, is crazy. That's, like in high school, it's just crazy. Next. Same question, man. How'd you get into it and why cadets?
Sure, yeah. It's really similar to what, it's funny to hear Scott and his story. I'm a Canadian, and I was in a band up in Windsor, Ontario, the Scarlet Brigade Band. And we had a couple guys come up and instruct. Ray Case, who taught the cadets horns, or was somewhere in the horn staff at one point, and Rob James, who was a teacher with us for quite a while. And he was chatting with me, and said, I threw around the idea of, maybe going down and trying out for a drum corps. He said, well, you should try the cadets. And this was in '85 that we were doing this. And so in '86, I went down and tried out. Barely made it. A Canadian marching band isn't even close to what the Americans have, so far as high schools and so on. The culture, none of it really exists in Canada. It was funny. Go a year before '86. I learned the music as best as I could. Jones will remember this, but I showed up and I couldn't march and play anything, really, And I think it was a shock to everyone, like, this guy has made it this far, and now look at him. 16, I was 17 in '87. So that's how I got into it. And
that's another testament to maybe the staff, so someone who was in a Canadian marching band who couldn't really march goes and marches a cadets drill as their first drum corps experience. That's insane.
Big leagues.
Exactly. That is that's incredible, man. Very good stuff.
Yeah, same thing. Like Scott, I was in marching band at school. And I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, so East Lansing, Michigan. We had Michigan State Marching Band, which was just phenomenal. And I saw their drum line and got hooked. I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. All the stick tossing, the stick, back sticking and stuff like that. I was like, that's super cool, man. How do these? I mean, the concept of even playing a roll together was like, wow. And
Right.
me and Dave Mays, snare guy from Michigan, we went up there and marched Northern Aurora. And 1 year, and then we marched Blue Coats, and then we came out to, we were marching Blue Coats. We saw cadets warming up, and they're playing these threes to the eyeballs, and we're like, yeah, we wanted to do that. So that was in '86, and with those mirrored drums, those things were badass too. We're just like, check those things out, those are so cool.
You marched Blue Coats '86.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that was the year before they busted in the top 12. So that was a double win for you.
Yeah.
In '87.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, I love those guys, man. In '87, that was a cool. Didn't they have like maybe 230 snare drums that year?
Yeah, it was.
They had a huge snare drum line that year.
Yeah.
No, great stuff.
You played snare with Blue
Yeah,
Coats?
I played snare at Blue Coats,
You had
and then I
all-
auditioned for snare at cadets.
Right.
And then just when we moved out, or just about before we moved out there, Hannum and Unk sat me down and said, and one of the tenors had left, and they said, well, we need a tenor player, and do you want to do it? And I'm like, no, not really. And, but then I was like, I kind of do, I kind of wanted to learn toms. And then they're like, well, you can learn toms or we're going to cut you. And I'm like, okay, I'll learn toms.
Okay. I always wanted to be a tenor
Exactly.
Yeah, Unks could be very subtle in his any day, right?
Yeah. And so I remember going home. I remember just strapping them on that weekend. I'm like, damn, these things are like so heavy,
What are some of the challenges of playing a Hannum book?
I would say a Hannum book. He is very focused on phrasing and making sure that we complement what it is that the horn in the front is doing, because they kind of carry, the melody and the, kind of the overall architecture of whatever piece it is that we're performing. So if we want to, kind of go balls to the wall and stick out or be too loud or not be appropriately phrased at any point in time, he will come unglued. Because that's, in my opinion, that's kind of what his real strength from writing a book is the balance with the horns. And then, we certainly have focus moments and times where we get to be front and center and the horns are either taking a breath or kind of backing up what we're doing. But, certainly from front to back. And then as Zingali gets his hands on us and starts spreading us, snares in this end zone, tenors in that end zone, the pit up front and the basses in the parking lot kind of thing. That's where I think it gets to be the biggest challenge, is trying to do all of that and have it all the sound arrive at the front at the same time.
What are your thoughts on just the book?
Yeah, I found I adapted well to it. I originally auditioned '86 on snare and didn't do all of that, but the melodic way that he approached tenor drums and particularly to the horn section, a lot of it made sense with mellophones and so on. That, I guess, just the way that I learned and that I played, it made a lot of sense to me. Conversely, I went back and played in '91, my Age Out Year Unks wrote. I found it very different the way he approached tenor parts. They're very similar to snare drumming, I guess. Some of the, I don't know how to even explain it, but the way that he wrote was a lot different. I had a harder time learning his book than Hannum, so it was just more melodic, I guess would be the word for it.
Ron, what about you? Same thing.
So, well, it was like writing I hadn't really experienced. Like, it was so melodic and so dynamic. And then, like with the pings and everything, and just the sounds and everything, it was really cool. Like, and then when to do it on, I learned basically learned the snare parts, and then I had to relearn all the tenor parts. I'm like, wow, this is even more cool on tenors because it's so, you got all these drums and all these voices. So it's so melodic. And you're right, Scott, how it supports the horns. I mean, in some ways we'd be ramming in the background and it would just fit so well. And then when you come up to the hits, you're like, holy crap, you know, just like super powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you something. Tenors are never better than snare. So tenor parts are never better than snare. So that's a back and forth between Mike Jones and I, like the fighter pilots versus the tenor players. You know, I think that's a constant.
Tenors were always the worst marchers. They were always thought they were right.
Yep, because we were.
You just had to
complain
go
about
with
the
it.
drum being heavy. Like a whole drum.
But for me, what was most challenging, like the guy said, just the range of dynamics that Hannum wrote in a 4-bar passage. Sometimes you had forte, mezzo piano, and then there was an accent, and then we had a dampen or some crazy, you know, he certainly explored a lot of different sounds. Ron mentioned the ping sound where we were rim shot with the tip of the stick, so it was a higher frequency. He had these different dampening techniques. We'd play with the tips of our sticks.
I saw that. I've seen those. Yeah, I've seen those videos where you guys were doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like strings or something. The thing that I think goes unnoticed is the muscle control that is required at those extremes, because it wasn't like we were phrased up for 8 counts and we were phrased down. Sometimes you'd be here and then it would jump and then it would this and then it would that. And then, you know, so the control that it took to play that book dynamically, because, Hannum, you know, if there was something going on melodically, you usually heard it in the quad.
Do any of you guys play kit? Like, do you play out and gig and that kind of stuff?
I used to.
My basement with the headphones on.
Okay. Because, something that you said, this is kind of unrelated to this 87 thing, but something you said, Mike, just then, some of the, and it was the same with Santa Clara, there's a lot of just dynamic differences. And from one bar to the next, you're playing fortissimo, you're playing pianissimo, and there's a lot of muscle control that happens with that. And so I've noticed that as I gig and I go out and I play drum set and there's all these grace notes and all these secondary accents, I use that same thing. You know what I mean? Like, and then I notice that in other players like David Garibaldi, these other guys that play these secondary inside notes, Bernard Purdy, these cats. And a lot of that I learned the concept of that from drum corps, even though my hands aren't as hard as they were back then, but that concept I use. A lot of guys criticize the cadets for not playing a lot of notes. You know, that you guys take a break for a while and then play for a little while and then take, you know, and we're using BD as the standard, as the group that plays all the notes and then looks for ways to put flams on those. And they did it everything, but they didn't march. So what are you guys' response to that?
Well, we absolutely played a very different kind of book than did SCV and certainly than did Devils, right? Where you'll notice that nobody from Garfield ever went to individuals. That was not kind of the cup of tea that we were about. So when you watch, and this, as we were chatting before this started, you know, going back, this has kind of made me go back and try and find a lot of parking lot videos and that kind of thing. Watching the amount of notes that Devils played back then was absolutely more than what we would have played. It was a very different style of play, right? That they were very rudimentary. With just some of the coolest stick work, and you know, they were always crystal clean, and like I said, played a lot of notes. Whereas we, with the books that we played, we as we kind of chatted about, were more into featuring different sections at different points in time. You know, the quads would have a time over here, the snares would be playing off of the sopranos, and then, you know, the bass drums would come in and mirror some crazy crap that the baritones were doing, or whatever that may have been. All the while, the rest of the segment is playing, just not in a featured role, but more as a supporting cast. Mm-hmm. And because we were not front and center and, kind of in your face as much as a Devil's style may have been, I think that's probably the genesis of where a lot of that criticism would come from. It never, my other constituents here would agree that it never bothered us one bit. We knew what we did was extraordinarily challenging in some of the similar ways and some in very different ways. We felt like at the end of the summer, what we had accomplished in the 11 and a half or 12 minutes was certainly on par, in some years probably a little bit more than some of the competitors would have been.
I love that. That's very good.
Very good.
That's very good. Jordan.
Jordan, yeah.
Yeah, how much do I have to say after that?
What else is there?
Yeah, no, it really is very much about the music, right? And that's really what it came down to, I think. I don't know if it would work, the style of drumming the Blue Devils played, the jazz, to Appalachian Spring, If you listen to it, an orchestra playing it, I think really that is the approach that Hannon probably took when he was writing these scores. What would fit, when there's these lighter passages and so on, he put in these little, ostinatos that were quiet in the background that were, they were tasty parts, really tasty, and especially when you're playing them clean, you're really moving on the field, So the approach to it, it always really was about the music, about the presentation and how it fit in. Remember what he used to say, parts is not parts, or parts are not parts. So true. And really, we didn't play parts. It was a presentation as it is a whole.
Yeah. Ron.
Yeah. That's a good question, and I agree with what everyone said. Because we would probably joke around that Devils are they're ramming, but they're parking. So it's a different. But I think if everyone played the same style, who's going to want to hear the same chord 12 times? I think that's the cool thing about it, is everyone had their own little style, and we all respected each other because we knew that what everyone was doing was at a next level. And then just the way the judges are the judges too. They're going to score the way what they want to hear, and we don't. That was one cool thing that we always used to talk about. I remember Hannum and Unc saying, just do your best. You don't even be thinking about the judge. They're going to score the way they're going to score. You just go out there and be the musician that you are, and I think that's what we did.
Don't tick.
Yeah, if you want to die, or do 50 push-ups.
Thank you, Scott, because Mike never says that part. He always says the part that you said, Ron, like just go out and do your best. He never puts in the don't tick part.
But no, actually, James, I kind of wanted to move that kind of in that direction, because this is at least to me, this is a very special. We had a hard time at Garfield recruiting quad players for some reason. So this group is special. Jordan had marched in '86, so he had already had a year under his belt. But Scott was coming to the quad line from the bass drum. He gained his fame on bass playing number one. And Ron, who I didn't until last year found out that was his first year playing quads ever. So the fact that we were able to kind of gel together as a section, I kind of want to get into that a little bit, because that was kind of interesting how that happened. I don't remember how it happened, but these are four kind of oddballs, and then to play at the level that we achieved at the end, that's an incredible story within itself.
Let's address that. Go. Yeah.
Who wants to, Ron, why don't you talk about, what was the challenge of that year for you?
Well, for me, I was trying to learn the whole new book, and
and not just a whole new book, a cadet's book.
A cadet's book.
And not only a cadet's book, but you're moving your arms in a different way now.
Yeah, like these six drums, and they're weighted so much. those strongest drums ever, man. I went back to Michigan State. We all had Yamahas, and they're nothing. It was end of June. I was struggling just a little bit. Every now and then because the drill was getting super complex, and I would slip a little bit on the parts. And it was in June. We were in Florida, and it was, one of these brutal, and your soles of your shoes are coming off, right? It's so hot. And I remember just Unks, I think it was Unks that came up to me and said, dude, you need to get it together. Like, you can't be missing those little parts. Otherwise, you're going home on a plane next week. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to get this shit. You know? But that was like right when, at the end of June is like when it really, it just like, I was like, it all really started to gel where I didn't have to, because, you know, it's when the parts become internal and you're just focusing on playing them and marching. That's like,
Autopilot.
It was the turning point for me. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I answered that question, but that's what came out.
I mean, I'm impressed because you were able to play, you know, the quality of playing at that level that year. We had kind of achieved a high quality of sound. So you had to jump in there and marching around like that. I can't imagine a first timer, but
well, it's a good thing I did play drum set before that, so I was used to match grip, so it wasn't that big overall. But yeah, I mean, the parts and everything is just so. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, can I tell you why he was able to do that?
Why? Because he was a snare drummer, right? What about you, Scott? Coming from bass drum.
87 was kind of crazy, right? Because if you remember, over the Christmas break, Hopkins asked me to be drum major.
Right.
After Armstrong. So I had to, you know, think about that. And I was like, I do not want to spend all day, every day with the horns. That's just not interesting. In addition, I had worked the entire off season, cover your ears, Mr. Travers, to be in a snare line. So I was playing snare for quite a while in a couple of the winter camps. And then, you know, I got the old, you know, well, this way, come here with me, from Hannum. And then he was like, all right, You've clearly put in your work, but we need you to go play number one. I was like, all right, whatever you need me to do. So I went and played number one for a couple of camps in '87 as well. And then this beast shows up on Friday night and straps on the number 5, and his name happened to be Mookie. And with that,
legend,
Corley moved up to number 1. And I got a second, okay, come with me. And I go into the little back room with Unkston Hannum. They're like, I was like, no, I told you I don't want to be drum major. They're like, no. Go stand next to Jones. I was like, holy shit.
Wow.
I have no clue what I'm going to do over here. And I walked in and put him on, stood next to Jones. He looked at me and was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. I got another one with training wheels on now that I got to take to the ropes. So I was not good for a very long time. I don't know if I ever got good. Good enough, though. And I'll never forget that it was improvement by humiliation that we were, I don't know if it was at the beginning of tour or in one of the last camps, we were playing singles and 6 with the monkey sticks. And doing this motion, you know, from 1 to 2 and back, where both hands are going in the same direction, I shit the bed like there was nobody's business. And this is, you know, we're freaking on tour playing shows, and I'm hitting rims. So, you know, Unks just was like, or Hannum was like, stop, go fix that. And basically kicked me out of rehearsal. Jonesy, you know, grabbed my drum right before I left. He said, listen, just because the notes are fast doesn't mean your arms are fast. With that piece of education, I came back 20 minutes later and was just fine. So, and, you know, same thing going from 4 up to 1 or whatever the case may have been. That was the single bit of coaching that he gave me that stuck like glue and instantly made me be phenomenally cleaner. Just the notes are fast, your arms don't move fast. And with that, I was good.
I think it helped that I played snare too, because Hannah was like, and Unks were like, we're going to put you next to the snares. Like, it's actually going to be really good because you're used to listening to snares, and you can help blend it with the toms. And it really did. I mean, they put me near the snares almost all the time. So it actually was really comfortable for me to listen to the snares and the tenor. So I was like bridging the two sections together. So that was one thing I think that helped us gel a little bit.
Yeah, that's a tough position too. The either the snare or the tenor that join the two sections. Yeah,
because you're hearing the different parts.
Yeah. That's got to be a strong player.
I thought Jordan was near the snares, or did you guys switch off?
We switched it up too. Yeah, it's changed.
I always remember you leading the drill a lot, Ron. I always remember you leading like the end. Jordan had great hands. You know, he couldn't march, but he had great hands. Scott had great hands too, so it was easy to kind of pull those guys on. And then Ron was just smart. You know, he was just He was just in there. And there was some point in the season, I don't remember when, but we just kind of locked in and we kind of never looked back.
Yeah.
Your feet are not tough enough. They're not decisive.
Marching a Zingali drill wearing 35 or 40-pound drums. You know, how were you guys able to play the things you did, carrying this stuff, marching the way you did? Let's start again. I just see Scott up there first, so let's go with you, man.
I don't think we knew how tough it was going to be before we got there, and we just kind of had to do it. It wasn't really an option or a choice or anything to that effect. I do think that in '87, part 3, when we learned that and we're doing it without any drums on, we were all like, holy God, this is brutal, because, you know, the whole thing starts at 184, and by the time we're done, I think we were at 206 or 212 or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And the 90+% of that was crabbing. It wasn't frontwards and backwards. So we kind of figured out, I think, as a collective drum line on our own, that we were going to have to be physically in shape to be able to do this with any level of success. And when we moved into that freaking hellhole known as Ramapo College, for our kind of, pre-tour rehearsals, every morning before we started, we would, the drum line would show up, probably almost an hour before, stretching and all of that with the rest of the corps, and we would go on a miserable run through the woods, around some cornfield, back through the woods and back, just because we knew we were going to have to be in shape. And it was kind of funny that nobody skipped. Bettis probably cut more than a few corners because he wasn't big into the running thing. But we all kind of just were like, fuck it, let's go. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. And kind of got ourselves in pretty damn good shape before we started on tour. And I think that was one of the biggest things we did right. And again, that was just us doing it. That wasn't Ungster or Hannum or anybody hounding on us. We just kind of were like, all right, we think we got something kind of cool going on here. Let's make sure we can do it the right way, and sucking air and not being able to move is not.
Remember when we learned the second half of the show, part 3, and they put that block in, the whole corps resolved in a block, the drum lines on the side. Then the drum line had to crab to the whole other side of the field. And I remember when we first did that move, when we finished, everybody's like, it was like, it's your one leg all the way across the field. That move was crazy.
Yeah, that was exhausting. We'd be breathing like dogs in heat or something, when we got to the end of some of that stuff, especially those ones where we're spinning those lines. We were being on the end of those things, which you were getting air in between. Your feet weren't touching at the same time. You're like kind of hop running. It was insane. Yeah,
the
we took a lot of pride in that as well, right?
Yeah.
That, being able to basically sprint while playing anything, let alone having to do the phrasing and timing, and part 3, we had a lot of notes in there, controversial to what others may have thought. That was a pretty demanding book standard still, just for part 3, like at 184, 206, whatever. But we really did take a lot of pride in making sure that the marching piece of it was every bit as precise as the playing piece of it was, because that was a differentiator for us, and we knew it.
Yeah. Those of us outside of the cadets always just called it Garfield drill. Like if you were doing anything fast or crabbing or whatever, it was just referred to as Garfield shit.
No kidding.
Stuff. Yeah.
Definitely there was a technique to it. At the very beginning, I go back even a year in '86, I didn't know how to learn how to march with the quads on. I just didn't understand that process. For me, '87 was much easier because I already knew that process, how to do it. But, Michael took me aside several times and said, you almost got to be a ballerina on these things. You're on your tippy toes, and that's all that touches when you're at that speed. You're not flat-footed. And they revolutionized the way you do it with a set of drums on, moving sideways. Having said that, once you had the momentum going, pretty damn hard to stop too.
That's the other thing. And so you guys are doing these things, and you almost have to plan 2 seconds ahead because you have to slow these things down to make a direction change.
Yep.
It's
definitely
it's
had some
crazy,
collisions, that's for sure. And
There was some bumper drums early on.
Can't forget
absolutely.
that one that Mookie went over.
Was that?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask you, Mike. Is Mookie the guy that went over in '84, or was that somebody else?
No,
in
those were
84.
horn players. Those were horn players. Mookie fell in a show in '87.
But I thought a bass drummer went down at Whitewater in '84 over the
No,
horn players.
that was just brass players.